Have you ever stopped to think about who the richest person who ever lived was? No, it's not Elon Musk. It's not Jeff Bezos. It's not some 21st century billionaire. The richest person in history lived almost 700 years ago. He ruled an empire in West Africa, and his fortune is so absurd that historians still can't calculate it precisely. Mansa Musa, Emperor of Mali, between 1312 and 1337. He controlled half the gold of the ancient world. When he traveled, he didn't carry money, he carried gold bars. When he gave alms, he brought down the economies of entire countries. In 1324, he made a pilgrimage to Mecca, a journey that changed the world, and that accidentally destroyed Egypt's economy for more than a decade. This video isn't about just any African king. It's about the man who transformed the desert into a gold mine. To understand Mansa Musa, we need to understand the Mali Empire. In the 14th century, Mali was one of the largest and richest empires in the world, larger than medieval Europe, richer than China. It stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Niger River. It controlled the gold mines of Bambuk and Bure, and the salt routes of the Sahara. Mansa Musa was not the first emperor, he was the 10th, and he shouldn't have been king. He was the son of a man who was never king. But fate is ironic. The previous emperor, Abu Bakr II, had an obsession. He wanted to explore the Atlantic Ocean. He gathered 200 ships. He gathered men. He gathered gold. He gathered provisions, and he set sail. He never returned. No one knows what happened to him. Perhaps he sank. Perhaps he reached somewhere. Perhaps he found the New World before Columbus. No one knows. But Musa, who had been appointed regent during the emperor's absence, became the new emperor. The empire he inherited was already rich, but Musa was not a man to rest. He was ambitious, and he transformed Mali into something the world had never seen. What made Mansa Musa so rich? The answer is simple: gold. But it's not just gold. Everyone has gold. Musa's secret was controlling almost half of the ancient world's gold. He controlled the gold mines of Bambuk, Bure, and Wangara, the richest mines in the world at the time. He also controlled the trade routes of the Sahara. Salt, yes, salt, was as valuable as gold in some regions of Africa, and Musa controlled the salt as well. Arab merchants traveling through the Sahara in camel caravans made stops in the empire's cities: Timbuktu, Gao, Jenne. They traded fabrics, spices, books, and they took gold back to the north. But Musa wasn't just a man of fortune, he was intelligent. He understood that controlling gold was important, but controlling trade was even more important. He imposed a single law and order throughout the empire. With that, trade routes became safe. Merchants trusted him. Gold flowed. And there was a curious fact. The empire was so rich that the gold miners, the workers of the land, also exploited the salt mines. Salt. You and I, today, open the refrigerator and take out salt. Back then, salt was weighed on gold scales. Arab historians of the time, like Ali Drisi, wrote that in Mali, a pound of salt was worth a pound of gold. 1 for 1. Salt for gold. That was the rule of trade. Musa didn't create this rule, but he consolidated it. He made the empire so stable that trade could flow uninterrupted for years. Merchants no longer needed to fear robberies. They could cross the desert with their caravans, knowing that on the other side, in Niani, they would be received with justice. Stability was Musa's most valuable currency.
In 1324, Mansa Musa decided to do something every Muslim should do. He went to Mecca, the pilgrimage, the Hajj. Normally, a pilgrim takes some provisions, a mule, a tent. Musa took an entire empire, 60,000 people. Yes, 60,000 people. And they weren't just soldiers, they were officials, slaves, merchants, poets, musicians, doctors, all dressed in Persian silk and gold brocade. 12,000 slaves, each carrying 4 pounds of gold. The slaves alone carried 48,000 pounds of gold. In addition, there were 80 camels. Each camel carried 300 pounds of gold.
300 pounds times 80 is 24,000 pounds. Adding it all up, more than 70,000 pounds of gold, just in one man's caravan. But that's not even the most impressive part. The impressive part is what he did with that gold. He gave gold to everyone. He gave it to the poor he met along the way. He gave it to the cities he passed through, Cairo, Medina, Mecca. He gave so much gold that the merchants began to despair. Why? Because the gold lost its value. Suddenly, everyone had gold. The supply increased. The price fell. Gold, the most precious metal in the world, lost its value for more than a decade. A decade. Historians say that gold only returned to its normal price in 1335, 11 years later. Musa realized what he had done, and then he did something even smarter. He borrowed all the gold he could from the moneylenders of Cairo at high interest rates and paid it back in gold. He basically flooded the market with gold to break the economy, borrowed it to buy back the gold himself, and then paid with gold he already had. The only time in history that a man directly controlled the price of gold in the Mediterranean. The historian al-Umari, who interviewed Egyptians who knew Musa, wrote, "This man made a caravan so large that the world had never seen the like. He gave so much gold that Cairo spent a decade in crisis. The Egyptian gold market, which was the center of Mediterranean trade, collapsed. The value of gold fell to less than half."
European merchants who bought gold from Egypt began to pay in silver because gold was no longer worth anything. It was an economic earthquake that spread from Cairo to Venice. But Mansa Musa was not just a man of gold, he was a builder. He returned from his pilgrimage with a mission to transform Mali into the cultural and educational center of the Islamic world. He brought architects from Andalusia and Cairo. He built mosques. The Djinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu, one of the oldest in the world, is still standing. He built the University of Sankore. Yes, university, in Timbuktu, in the 14th century. The University of Sankore had libraries with thousands of manuscripts, lawyers, astronomers, mathematicians, poets, all teaching and learning in that city. Timbuktu became one of the most important centers of knowledge in the world. While Europe was living through the Dark Ages, feudal lords fighting over pieces of land, illiterate peasants, Timbuktu had a university with libraries of thousands of books. Timbuktu was the Oxford of its time, but richer. He also built the Great Palace, the audience hall in Yani, his capital, a stone monument with domes, colorful arabesques, windows lined with silver and gold. When merchants saw it, they knew they were arriving at the center of the world. The construction was not just ostentation, it was propaganda. An empire that built mosques and libraries was an empire that considered itself civilized. Musa understood that wealth was not enough. Culture was necessary. Knowledge was necessary. He didn't want to be remembered merely as the richest man. He wanted to be remembered as the man who enlightened Africa. And he succeeded. Timbuktu became synonymous with wisdom. The manuscripts that have survived to this day, more than 300,000, bear witness to what he built. A curious fact about Mansa Musa.
It wasn't just gold that made the empire rich, it was salt. Today, salt is cheap. Back then, salt was worth almost as much as gold. Why? Because salt preserves meat. Salt gives flavor. Salt keeps people alive. And in the Sahara Desert, the only source of salt was far away, in the north. Musa controlled the salt routes. Camel caravans crossed the desert, taking salt south and bringing gold back north. This exchange system made Mali a power. Merchants of the time said that in Musa's empire, you could exchange a pound of salt for a pound of gold. 1 for 1. Salt for gold. Because it was fair. Because you needed both. And he not only controlled gold and salt, he also controlled ivory, ebony, spices, everything that North Africa and Europe wanted. He had a monopoly. Salt was extracted from the mines of Tagaza, a city in the middle of the desert, so isolated that the houses were made of blocks of salt.
The miners lived there, under the scorching sun, extracting the salt that supplied the entire Sahel. Caravans of 10,000 camels transported the salt south, and they returned with gold. Musa not only controlled these routes, he protected them. With his army, he ensured that no looters attacked the caravans. Trade flowed, taxes came in, and wealth grew. But, like everything, Musa's empire did not last forever. Mansa Musa died in 1337, or 1332. Historians debate. Because with the wealth he had, time seems to be a minor issue. After his death, the empire began to decline. His sons, Magan and Suleiman, tried to preserve what he had built, but the empire was too large. Trade routes began to fragment. Neighboring kingdoms like the Mossi invaded. Gold continued to be mined, but the empire never regained its former glory. But Musa's legacy remained. Timbuktu, the city he transformed into a center of knowledge, is still remembered. The mosques he built still exist. The University of Sankore still stands. And manuscripts from the empire are still studied today. What he built survived centuries of invasions, pillaging, and neglect. And there's something you need to know. His wealth was no coincidence. He created a functioning empire, imposing a law and order that no other empire in Africa possessed. Even the traveler Ibn Battuta, who visited Mali decades after Musa's death, was impressed by the peace and justice of the place. He wrote, "Among the peoples of Africa, the Mali Empire is the most prosperous and the most peaceful. The merchants do not fear thieves, the judges are just, and the people trust the king." That was Musa's legacy. It wasn't just gold, it was order. So, who was Mansa Musa? Was he the richest man in the world? Yes. Was he the man who broke Egypt's economy? Yes. Was he the man who built universities when Europe was burning books? Yes. But he was much more than that. He was a visionary. He understood that wealth is worthless if it is not used to build. He used his gold to create knowledge, to create culture, to create an empire that lasted more than 100 years. Today, when we think of Africa, we think of poverty, war, misery. Musa reminds us that Africa was the center of the world, the heart of global trade, the cradle of education. The historian Al-Umari, who interviewed Egyptians who knew Musa, wrote, "This man made a caravan so large that the world had never seen the like." And, for those who are curious, the traveler Ibn Battuta visited Mali a few decades after Musa and wrote, "Among the peoples of Africa, the empire of Mali is the most prosperous and the most peaceful." Today, Timbuktu and Djenné are World Heritage Sites, but they are not just stone monuments. They are symbols of an era when the richest man in the world did not use his wealth to isolate himself in palaces. He used it to build libraries. He used it to build schools. He used it to show that wealth is not the end, It is the beginning. Mansa Musa, 1312 to 1337. The man who broke the economy with gold. The man who built empires with salt and knowledge. The man who taught the world that wealth only has meaning when it is shared.